I was terrified. I was afraid that if I could not sleep anymore or sleep well, life as I knew it was over. I'd have to quit my job. I direct a large nonprofit that does housing and social services for the homeless and very low income folks. And for better or worse, that work is part of my identity. So I'm losing my identity. And you told me, look, Walter, if Richard, can recover from insomnia after 40 years, if Coach Ali can do this, if all these people in these recovery videos that you love to watch, if they can do this,
right,
you can do this too.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Richard, one of the coaches from the Sleep Coach School. And today I have the great pleasure of welcoming Walter to discuss his insomnia recovery journey. Good morning, Walter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Good morning, Richard.
Great. Well, Walter, you and I had quite a few sessions over the summer and early fall, and you're out the other side now, and you're apparently doing really well from what you mentioned, right?
Yeah. First off, just really excited and really grateful to be able to visit with you today and share my story. I imagined this day many times during the last 7 months. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. That's totally mutual, Walter. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us the story of your insomnia journey?
Yeah, I want to say too about the recovery stories. I think of all the resources in the program, the Sleep Coach School, I probably leaned into the recovery stories more than anything. Catch myself. I'd try not to binge watch them. Like maybe watch one a day if I was feeling really anxious. I think what I really liked about them was they're just real people. Like these aren't actors. I'm not an actor.
But we haven't used any actors for this. Not so far, so good. We haven't.
Right. But also, I tried so hard in this program intellectually to fix my sleep. But the people in these recovery videos, they're not Einsteins. They weren't very smart people. None of them are, I think, Zen Buddhist monks, and doesn't require that you go to a monastery and escape from the world to recover. So that just gave me inspiration and a lot of hope. I will say too, I'm going to try and, when I get to my story, I'll share about my timeline and some of the medications that I experienced. I watched a lot of videos to try to tease that out.
Yeah.
It's tricky because everyone's got a different timeline, and this isn't a medical program, and the solution isn't really ultimately, wasn't medication for me. I'll try to be candid about that.
Great. Yeah.
I do want to say too how grateful I am because we did a lot of one-on-one calls, and you were always calm, you were always encouraging, and you told me, look, Walter, if Richard, can recover from insomnia after 40 years, if Coach Ali can do this, if all these people in these recovery videos that you love to watch, if they can do this,
right,
you can do this too.
Right.
And you were right. It feels, sorry if I'm emotional, but this was a very hard experience. And if anybody out there is watching can get something from my story and know that if I can do it, then it's possible.
Yeah. So basically giving back, you got a lot of benefit from all the videos you watched of people's journey from insomnia to sleeping well. And now you're giving back and providing your story. And if it's emotional, Walter, that's totally fine. Yeah. I mean, that's totally fine. Yeah. I get that way sometimes when I see people recover from this. It's in a sense, it's a spiritual journey. It's turning your life around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Walter, when did your insomnia start and what were the circumstances?
Yeah. So in some ways, my start was not very remarkable. I have a history of really good sleep. I'm lucky that way. But it started March 2024. I live in Austin, Texas, and I love the South by Southwest Music Festival. And this March, for 10 days, I just stayed out really late. I didn't worry about my sleep. I wanted to hear a lot of music. Heading into April, I think that I never settled down back into my normal sleep pattern, and I went out to hear some music and then came home and didn't sleep. Went to a poetry slam and then came home at 9 o'clock because I didn't want to stay out late. Didn't sleep well. Typical things like reading a book or doing a meditation would sometimes work, but not work. I started this medication, and 10 days later, I had a really rough night, didn't sleep much at all. And I thought maybe it's the medication. And so I looked at the long list of 50 side effects. And of course,
Oh,
one
yeah.
of them is insomnia. And,
Right.
oh, that must be it. Stopped the medication, slept great the next night, but then I didn't sleep well the next night after that. Um, so altogether, I'd say in April, my sleep fell apart and this fear came in about what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I think now that I've thought a lot about it, I did in my sleep history, I really valued sleep. Sleep was like a superpower for me. High achiever, big responsible job, would work out a lot and could count on sleep. I remember in college, my roommate or friends would pull an all-nighter, either for fun or for studying. And that was terrifying to me. The idea that somebody would stay up all night. So I think there's even a kind of a phobia root that around not sleeping well that goes way
Yeah.
back.
So even before you started having your issues with insomnia, you were afraid of it, just seeing your friends stay up, do all-nighters in college.
Yeah, not a conscious fear, but
Right.
it was back there. The first thing I did in April was read a lot online about cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBT-I. And that didn't make a lot of sense for me because my sleep hygiene was good. I would go to bed around 10. I'd calm down before that. And then the suggestion about sleep restriction, that just, what do you mean? I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, and just so for people who may not be aware, sleep restriction is this approach that's very common in mainstream sleep guidance. And that just involves really narrowing the time that you're in bed. So like from midnight to 5 a.m. is a common one, for example. And the
Yeah.
idea is, and I know you know this, Walter, but the idea is that if you restrict your sleep, that'll make you really sleepy. That'll raise your sleep drive. But our approach is more, the problem isn't really sleep drive. The problem is the hyperarousal that with a lot of sleep drive, the hyperarousal just keeps you awake. So yeah.
Yeah. And as I learned from the program, that made a whole lot of sense to me. I think the first call to the doctor was an online doctor, and they said, take this antihistamine type medication. It's not as super strong. It'll just make you sleepy. And it may not work for long term, but for a few nights. And it did work well the first night, not so much the second night. About that time, late April, May, I found at a used bookstore the sleep book by Guy Meadows. It took an acceptance therapy approach, and I really liked it. It made sense to me that he emphasized not getting out of bed, just staying in bed, and mindfulness to be very calm and relaxed, accepting whatever fears come in. There's a 30-day app, so I downloaded that and I did that. I kept looking. It just wasn't quite enough. And I was expecting each day in the app that I was going to get the Jedi mind trick, and it was, explain it. And the second medication that I went on from my doctor was Ambien. And this was the same time I'm reading this book. Doctor explained it's true sleep pill. You'll fall asleep with it. And I did. But he said just 3 days, get yourself back on track. So I did it for 3 days, slept. And then the next 3 days, as I went off of it, I didn't sleep very well, got very scared. And by the fourth day, I started taking a small dose again and became very dependent on it. I think by the end of May, I finished the 30-day app. I was dependent on the Ambien, and that sleep was synthetic. It wasn't restful.
Like a drugged sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember any dreams.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
I think I found Daniel in the sleep coach school, and then you I was looking on YouTube for Guy Meadows just to Sky, and the algorithm and its wisdom started popping up. A sleep coach school. And then the more I caught some of Daniel's videos, it was like, wow, this is complementary, but more deep and actually exactly what I'm experiencing. So our first call was, I think, early June.
Yes.
I have a lot of memories of that call. I don't know if you remember me.
Oh, I remember we had so many sessions together that you're not just one among many I've had this many sessions with. So yeah, you were pretty
Um,
scared, weren't you?
I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was afraid that if I could not sleep anymore or sleep well, life as I knew it was over. I'd have to quit my job. I um, direct a large nonprofit that does housing and social services for the homeless and very low income folks. And
Mhm.
for better or worse, that work is part of my identity. So
Mhm.
how I'm losing my identity.
Mhm.
I remember you told me at the time that my brain, very calmly, that my brain was catastrophizing, imagining the worst. I
Right.
hadn't heard that word before, but it completely clicked.
Yeah.
I think you told me at that first call that part of this program was to take sleep off the pedestal.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what you meant by that. Sleep was very high on the pedestal for me. I understand it now.
Yeah.
And you also said something really couldn't believe it. Like the program would help me go from, oh no, to, oh,
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine that. Like,
Yeah.
how could I be okay with not sleeping well or a bad night
Mhm.
or God forbid an all nighter, which I hadn't
Mhm.
experienced at that point. But I'm there now. And
Yeah.
your wisdom in the first time we met really rang true. I think it was a call soon after that with another coach. I questioned this notion of NADO, not attached to the outcome, because of course I want to sleep well. And the coach said another way to describe this is LADO, or less attached to the outcome. That was
Yeah.
really a relief for me to hear that.
Yeah.
I could do that.
Yeah. And I remember when you mentioned that, and that really rang a bell in my mind also, because yeah, I mean, we all want to sleep. And so we have some attachment to the outcome. We want to sleep. But if we have less attachment and it's less up on the pedestal, that's going to make it less of a big deal and make it more accessible to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I was in early June. I found that the Ambien was very short lived. So I could depend on it to fall asleep, but then I'd wake up at 1 or 2 in the morning and be in a panic.
Yeah.
And I put everything into this. Like I signed up for the drop in classes, and although I didn't go a lot at first, coaching, I journaled a lot. I pulled out of my closet, like I have all this mountain of journals.
Wow.
And then, I bought all of Daniel's books. So I
Oh,
bought all of those.
no.
I was
Great.
working on this, trying to fix this problem with everything I had.
Yeah. You were
I was a
hardworking and conscientious, certainly.
good student.
Yes.
And I need to say that's not necessary. I
Right.
realize that now. My brain was on fire. My
Yep.
brain was in survival mode. It loves me. I was trying to protect me and trying to figure out this problem that felt so not life or death, but just like life as I knew it. And everything
Yeah.
was going to change.
Yeah.
If I had a sleep effort, it was overthinking.
Hmm. We talked about that many times.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. Professionally, career-wise, in my work, I deal with dozens of problems on a daily basis.
Hmm.
So I am wired and trying to solve problems all the time,
Right.
and was very much in that kind of a mode. One thing I really like about this program is you don't hide the answer. The answer up front is really pretty simple, and that is to accept, to let go, to not struggle,
Hmm.
to do really nothing.
Hmm.
I think there was a honeymoon period where I started to sleep a little bit better and be a little less afraid. But maybe my overthinking then just made it more complicated.
Hmm.
I bought, I tried to not just journal, but I bought little toys and things. Like I bought this finger
Oh, I
trap.
love this. Yeah. Go do a little demo
So,
here.
so as an analogy to sleep, if you put your fingers in the finger trap and then you try to get out of it and pull tight, it tightens up immediately.
Right.
you feel the pulse in your fingers,
Mhm.
the answer is not to resist, but to actually push in, and then your fingers come right out.
Right.
I don't know if that's helpful.
Oh, I think it
Help you a
is.
little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. So much of what we say is so abstract that when you just have a concrete example, I think it really helps people understand.
The
Yeah.
even better example you gave me was in a tug of war.
Uh-huh.
One way to win is to just drop the rope.
Right.
So early on in the program, I'd heard all that, but I didn't experience it yet. And I think that I'm going to be honest, my journey through this was longer than average. Maybe because of medications, maybe because I was working too hard on it. But that's okay. At some point, I had to drop the expectations of that timeline too,
Right.
and go through the experience.
Yeah, and so just as we can be focused on how many hours we sleep every night, so we can be focused on how many weeks or months it's going to take to recover. So it's the
Right.
same phenomenon. It's just watching the clock or watching the calendar.
I think early on, I didn't grasp the befriending wakefulness.
Mhm.
That meant to me, okay, find something I like to do, look at old family photos, build some Legos, read a book for the minimum, shortest amount of time possible. So I'm sleepy and I can get back in bed and
Right.
go to sleep. That's what I was thinking. And it took a while to accept that actually it's just when I'm awake, whether I'm falling asleep or I wake up in the wee hours of the morning, being okay with it, finding
Yeah.
something that is enjoyable so that I'm not anxious and can bring the fear down. And maybe I do that for the rest of the night or for hours.
Yeah.
And that took a little while to accept.
Yeah, and I think we talked about the fact that it doesn't have to be something you don't have to when you're befriending wakefulness, you don't have to love it. You don't have to embrace it and hug it like you would because it sounded crazy to me when I first heard befriending wakefulness. Yeah, there's a charging grizzly bear and I'm going to give it a hug. And so
Yeah.
if we can just make wakefulness be a little less intolerant of it, I think that's where we want to go to start.
I mentioned Legos. The first project I did was the Sporkin. And
Uh-huh.
I remember the night I finished it at 2 in the morning or
But you
3
want
in
to
the
show that to
morning.
us because from a distance it looks like a real orchid.
Yeah, anyways, it's one of the
Amazing.
Lego flower kits.
That's amazing. You've kept that.
I did. At first, I was like, I finished it, and I was like, I was going to put this in the closet because the last thing I want to do is remind myself that I did this when I couldn't sleep.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized, no, I'm befriending wakefulness. This is my wakefulness orchid. Oh, what I could do even when I'm awake.
Good.
So I became okay with it. I almost found, I don't know if this is other people have experienced this, but I almost feel like I went back to my childhood. I reread A Wrinkle in Time, Watership Down,
Uh-huh.
which I forgot was all about these rabbits and their fears. And
Yeah.
I just, I watched the movie Monsters Inc., where the monsters aren't really scary. They're trying to scare the kids, but in fact, they're really friendly.
Yeah.
And so I know this is weird, but I'll just show you. I bought some of the little
Oh, yeah,
plush
I remember that now.
monsters.
Yeah. That's great.
And so I would give them names like this is Sully from the movie. And this was my fear of not sleeping that night.
Mhm.
And so if I was just really going over that again and again, I don't know, maybe I'd delegate to the little monster. First, I kept them in the closet, didn't want to be reminded of them. Later
Uh-huh.
on, I just put it under the pillow and tried
So,
that.
yeah, I mean, you're certainly the first, student I've ever had who makes, Lego flowers and has these little monster toys and so forth. I think that's great. It concretizes it, and, when something is concrete, it's not quite as scary,
Right.
as opposed to something that's vague and floating and abstract. You can put your finger on it. You can deal with it better.
Um, and none of these things were like breakthroughs for me, but they all little things that maybe helped. Ultimately, towards later in the summer, the Ambien wasn't really my friend. And the doctor, I switched over to Seroquel,
Mhm.
which really made me sleepy. And I found that I was in a phase for quite a long time, the yo-yo phase, where I would fall asleep and sleep great one night, take the medication, and then not sleep great the next night.
I remember that now, yeah.
it was intense. They can realize it's not the medication that's making me sleep or not sleep. It makes me sleepy. And if I'm going to befriend wakefulness and follow this path, ultimately, I don't want to feel drugged.
Right.
Let's befriend it with a clear mind.
Uh-huh.
So I would say by August, I decided then that I'm not going to keep pursuing the rescue pill. And I tried trazodone. I took Xanax a couple times.
Mhm.
My wife had me taking um, valerian root or magnesium, but I think it finally sunk in for me that there wasn't a rescue pill. There wasn't that medication out there if I'm having a bad night.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think probably things really started to get better at that point too.
When you were off all the pills?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And better and worse. I had some all-nighters, very terrifying at first.
Mhm.
Um, every time it happened, I'd be less scared, or the window of time, maybe only from 3 to 5 in the morning that I was really in a panic mode, shrunk. Ultimately to the point where I said, if I'm up all night, I'm gonna make the best of it and I'll be okay. And that sort of broke the fear and the fever panic sort of about that experience.
So you weren't fighting it, just like the finger trap. You weren't fighting it anymore. You were letting it be. Not that you
Right.
wanted this to continue indefinitely in the future, but by letting it be, we're able to ramp it down and eventually it goes away. But we can't push it away. It's got to be a long-term goal, but it's tricky if we try to make it a short-term goal.
Yeah. I think I got a lot from video recovery stories from, I think it was Cash and Sarah and others, where really what we're dealing with is fear. I finally started to accept that my insomnia was fear based.
Mhm.
Learned that at the beginning, but accepted it later on that if I address the fear, the sleep will catch up with that and come
Mhm.
back. And,
Yeah.
and it really did.
Yeah.
Um, I think something that you repeat again and again, because we're slow to get it, is that the journey isn't linear. It has fits and starts,
Mhm.
some good nights and some bad nights, and
Mhm.
there's not necessarily even a pattern to it.
Right.
Um, but over the season, it gets better.
Yeah.
Um,
It's always bumpy. It's always bumpy, and people can misinterpret the bumpiness or more discrete bumps and think, "Oh, I'm back to square one." But you can't unlearn everything you've learned, and you can't undo all the support you've gotten and so forth. So they're
True.
just little speed bumps, and they're always temporary.
Yeah. I know it's easy in these recovery stories. You see this arc from insomnia starting to recovery, and you think that it's smooth. And I just want to let people know that are watching that it's not only not linear, but it's really hard. There are some intense emotional times. Sleep deprivation is no fun, and um, it's not easy. I don't want to make it sound like everything was smooth. It wasn't. But
In
I
many
can
ways, it's
see
simple.
through.
Oh, I just want to say, in many ways, it's simple, but it's not easy.
Right.
Yeah. Just like dieting could be simple, but not easy.
Yeah. The last medication I tried, and I found my anxiety levels. I've never, not only to have a good sleep history, but I never really wrestled with anxiety before. But that was really kicked up, even when my sleep started to come back. So I did go on Lexapro low dose for a few weeks, thinking that that would really help me with anxiety. In my experience, it just made things worse.
Yeah.
And it was at that time that I kept hearing about Dr. Claire Weeks
Yeah.
from other students
Right.
and phenomenal psychiatrist or psychologist in the
Yeah.
60s who dealt with her own anxiety disorder. And so I got her book, Hope and Help for Your Nerves. And it
Mhm.
was so spot on with what I was experiencing. It was like, and this has worked for hundreds of thousands of people. This is the book
Yep.
that really influenced me a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
And I just wanted to say for our viewers that there are a lot of parallels with our approach here, and with Guy Meadows too. They're all a similar trajectory. There are differences, but they're great supplements to the teachings we have.
I think the finally off all medications and really leaning into everything I'd learned from the sleep coach school and from Claire Weeks, the anxiety tapered down, and it was a weird experience. The sleep fears started to go away, but I was really afraid of other things that weren't
Mhm.
necessarily rational. I don't want to say I was scared of my shadow, but it almost might have intrusive thoughts and physical sensations and tightness. And a coach told me that this is really just the fear center of your brain, that having been all scared and fired up about the insomnia is now continuing to look for other threats.
Right.
And for me, that was a pretty intense phase, September, October, heading into November. Mhm. Claire Weeks has an audio recording of a couple chapters of her book, which I found, and she recorded this before her death, and it was really in a grandmotherly voice, telling you will be okay,
Right.
accept and utterly accept.
Hmm.
There's 7 words that she shares to guide, not as a mantra, but as a guide: face, accept, float, and let time pass.
Hmm.
And each of those words took on and has taken on really great meaning for me. Um, Face your fear, utterly accept without trying to fix it, which is what I always wanted to try to do. But if my brain is scared about something, it's scared. It's okay. It's an okay emotion. Float to me really means many different things, but like floating in water, that I'm going to let myself relax and not try to flail around. Um, And then ultimately letting time pass. So you mentioned earlier, it's a spiritual experience through this journey. And so for me, finding that contrarian way of dealing with anxiety
Right.
really was my way out of it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Claire Weeks was helpful to you. That's great.
I, I think I want to say too that during this 5, 6 months, which was the length for me, and some people are going to be longer and some people much shorter. I think we have to normalize that it may take 6 to 12 months for
Yeah.
somebody, just depending on your personality, your history, your medications, your race, age, gender. Who knows?
And who's providing guidance for you also? Who's providing support and guidance? Yeah. So that's gonna determine how long it takes too. Yeah.
During this time, I think it was Coach Michelle has a video with Daniel talking about life happens during recovery. It'd be nice to not have anything stressful happen so that you can get your sleep on track.
Uh,
That's not what happens. I had hernia surgery,
right. We're at the beginning. Yeah.
COVID.
Yeah. And you
Um,
had COVID. Yeah.
had to make a number of trips out of town to be with my mom and in assisted living, and my in-laws, we moved them across state. So we had to pack up their house and sell it and move. And
Mhm.
in some ways, the busyness allowed me to shift my focus from sleep to, if I didn't sleep well, I got to get up the next day and carry on.
Right.
So many people comment, and in my own experience too, that it's so weird that if I sleep very little or even not at all, I can still function the next day.
Isn't it amazing sometimes? Yeah.
Super weird. Not suggesting that it's what I want to do. The physical fatigue, I'll be a little tired, but it's really the emotional fatigue that may really get me.
Yeah. And just for our viewers, anybody, if you take two people and take them to a lab and keep them awake all night, one's a normal sleeper, one's somebody with insomnia. The normal sleeper is going to say, "Oh yeah, I didn't feel very good that day, and I'm tired," so forth. But the person with insomnia will say, "Oh, it's terrible. It's the end of the world." And so that's the emotional overlay to the physical fatigue. So emotional fatigue is a very real thing.
I think that if I go back 2, 3 months where I was finally coming out of this and feeling recovered was I'd go to bed at night and put my head on the pillow and know and or say to myself, I just accept whatever happens tonight. I know I'm okay. Maybe I'll fall asleep right away and then I'll wake up, or maybe I'll take hours to fall asleep, or maybe I'll decide to read a book, or maybe I'll get up. I was never going to watch Netflix or anything, but by the end I was cheesy reality TV,
Uh-huh.
on Love is Blind. I was really anxious about not sleeping. I could just watch that show and I'd chill out.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah, especially if it's something with some humor. I've said it many times. I would watch Seinfeld, and just instead of being in that "oh no" place, it would be just focusing on the humor of the situation, and that's very
yeah,
relaxing. It's a
right.
nice anti-anxiety hack.
I would tell myself, I accept whatever happens tonight. I can't control it. I can't predict it. I'll be okay. And the other thing I tell myself is that I give up. I have been exhaustive in taking notes and journaling, in reading books, and I really give up. That was the acceptance, surrender.
Right.
We use lots of different words to
Right.
describe it, but that's the one for me that I, finally stuck.
Yeah, like what happens? Just
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Another book that we've talked about, and I think a lot of people like, is Live More, Think Less
Uh,
by Pia Callison. Um, if you've got that worry or that anxiety or thought that's stuck there, maybe the right answer is to not do anything about it.
yeah, and
And
yeah,
good.
you told me about that book, and then I read it and found it really very illuminating. And even just telling somebody those words, "live more, think less," can be really powerful because we're so focused on trying to think our way out of problems, and we're not living our life. When I in the thick of my insomnia, I could spend 5 hours a day thinking about my insomnia, researching it and journaling it and so forth. And boy, just cutting that down to an hour a day and then cutting it down further is going to have tremendous benefit for your
Yeah.
peace of mind and your sleep.
I had this dream, 2, 3 months ago. I was very vivid. I was wrestling. I was wearing a yellow onesie. I'm sure that's not what it's called.
Uh-huh.
And the opponent, the guy I was wrestling with, was just monstrous. He had a blue outfit on and just
Uh-huh.
smothering me and the dream. And my son was a wrestler in high school, so some of
Oh,
this
okay.
imagery comes from that. But I remember I'm wrestling and I'm losing, and the voice in my head says, just let him pin you. Lay back on the mat, put your shoulders back, and let him pin you, and it's over. And I did, and I let him pin me, and I fell asleep in the dream. And at that moment, I switched perspective, and all of a sudden, I was in the stands, and I was watching myself wrestling nobody. I was just flailing around. There wasn't an opponent there. And then finally, I watched myself put myself back on the mat and go to sleep.
Wow.
I guess I was incorporating everything I learned into,
Right. Right.
into
Great.
a creative way that the brain works.
Yeah. Oh. So Walter, what would you say, were there any aha moments along the way?
Definitely a lot of aha moments. I really got a lot out of ultimately got a lot out of the drop-in classes in
Mhm.
Slack.
And
Initially,
just
I was,
and just so our viewers know, so this is the Insomnia Immunity Program, and there's a curriculum video modules that Daniel drips out every week, and then there's the drop-in classes, which are twice a week, and anybody in this is a group Zoom, and then there's the Slack channel. And Slack is just a text-based communication app for people in some group or organization. So you could always ask questions there. So go ahead.
yeah, initially I didn't, I was hesitant to join the group classes because I was afraid of being triggered. Somebody would share an experience they were going through, and that would scare me. But I
Mhm.
did attend some, and maybe it was a little scary, but I also was encouraged. I'd hear other people going through the struggle, and
Right.
we could relate. So that was an aha. I'm not alone.
Hmm.
There's a real community of people out there that know what you're going through and they're experiencing it right now. As time went on, I remember one person, woman graduated. I don't remember her name. It was her last day on the Slack channel.
Uh-huh.
And it was, I go, oh, okay. Like, there's an end to this. This is
Yeah.
temporary. And she was very candid. She's like, I know you're going to be crying and upset and just distraught, and there's going to be low points, but I'm here to tell you that you get through this.
Yeah.
Um, I think as time went on, I was doing a little bit better. People would join the program in full fright mode, and I could hear their comments and questions. And I've been there. I remember when I had that same experience.
Right.
They're asking this question of Coach Richard, and I know the answer already. I think by October, November, a few students actually reached out to me in the Slack channel and asked me about my experience. And that felt really gratifying that I could maybe be helpful to them. And in
Yeah. So
some ways, it was hard to leave because by the end, I really care about how my, my new friends and colleagues are doing.
right. Great. Yes, you were starting to give back already. And that showed you that how far you had come in your journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So,
I think what I hope I never lose from this experience is a new way of dealing with stress and anxiety, more awareness. And I need to stay in an acceptance mode. There's another mode than fix it mode, the problem solving mode. And when the brain is scared and intense emotions, that's what it wants to know is that I'm listening, that I'm not fighting. This is not a real threat. So that is so just seems applicable in a lot of different um, stressful circumstances.
yes, you're actually answering the question that I like to ask toward the end of these discussions, and that is the wider application. So, yeah. So you have a new perspective on anxiety, on stress, on threats, and so forth. And that doesn't apply just to sleep, that applies to life. Yeah. Yeah.
And and I hope as well it's given me greater understanding and empathy in my work with the team that I work with and things that are going on in their lives with our residents and clients that may be dealing with mental health issues, with
Mhm.
family. I hope that empathy and that understanding stays with me.
Yeah. Great. We talk so much about self-kindness in this program, how important that is. But that then just goes to kindness to everyone, kindness to other people. So that's one of the other silver linings that a lot of people get out of this. Sounds like you did also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I say specifically to sleep, I don't sleep perfectly every night.
Uh-huh.
I maybe it gets even better and better, but I still maybe once or twice a week I'll have trouble getting to sleep or I'll wake up in the early morning. But it's just oh well now.
Yeah. Not a big deal.
And yeah, and I
Right.
carry on the next day and I don't have to think about it or worry about it anymore.
Great. So, Walter, last question. What would you, if you could go back and speak to the Walter from last March? So we're now January 2025. This is March 2024. If you could speak to him now with the perspective and knowledge you have now, what would you say?
I would say, look, this experience sucks, but it's temporary. You'll get through this. Your brain, Walter, is just confused when you're awake at night. You're going to be okay. You really don't have to do anything to fix this. Just be willing to accept this experience. The brain's going to autocorrect and you're going to get the sleep that you need. Mhm. I'm not suggesting that I would have listened to anything that any of that information that I told myself. I had built up sleep on such a pedestal
Mm-hmm.
and had such a phobia around sleep or being awake, God forbid, all night.
Yeah.
So part of this is experiential. I had to to go through the experience to understand what I would have told myself back then.
Yeah. Oh.
Mm.
Okay, great. Walter, thank you so much for meeting with me and telling your story so that you can be an inspiration to all the other people out there who are still struggling with their sleep. And if I can do it and you can do it, then all the people watching can do it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Walter. I look forward to just being in touch with you and so knowing how things are going in the future. And it's just been such a joy to work with you. And thank you so much for telling your story today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. See you later.
See you.
Hi, it's me, Daniel, and I hope you found incredible value in the video you just watched. If you did, please share it with the world, like it, comment, because this way more people can find their way to peaceful sleep. Now, if you like learning by reading and you feel like you have a little ways to go, then head over to Amazon and check out Set It and Forget It. It is a very easy book to read. It is flowy, it has illustrations. But if you're looking for some deeper understanding, then this is Natto, maybe the one for you. I hope they really help. Thank you for being here, and thank you for helping.